I met Daniel on a Tuesday because Tuesdays were the only days I could afford to take a long lunch. I was juggling 2 jobs then, tutoring high school, math in the mornings and managing the late shift at a coffee shop that smelled like burnt sugar and tired secrets. He walked in wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my entire closet. He said it was serendipity that the only free table was next to mine. I called it bad seating strategy. He laughed at that. I liked his laugh long before I liked him. We dated quietly at first. Walks, cheap tacos, hand-holding while jaywalking like we were invincible. He wasn't snobby about the things I couldn't afford. He left big tips when I introduced him to the staff. He learned my coffee order and pretended not to hate it. After a month, he told me about his family, in a way that was half warning, half apology. His father was the kind of man whose name opened doors and closed mouths. The kind of man whose photo hung in lobbies and whose lawyers never slept. Everyone in the city knew the last name. I just hadn't connected it to him until he said it out loud. Mercer. I didn't need Google to fill in the rest. The Mercers owned a construction empire. The kind that stamped its logo on stadiums and schools and glossy brochures about community. There were rumors. Always rumors. Project delays, safety shortcuts. Deals that went through so fast the ink didn't have time, to be honest. But rumors were a luxury for people who could afford the truth. I learned early, in foster homes with rotating rules and the kind of love that was rationed, that survival was more useful than outrage. After 3 months, Daniel said he wanted me to meet his family. He said it like a question, but the answer was already framed in his eyes. I told him yes. The dinner invitation came on thick white cardstock, as if RSVPing to meet your boyfriend's parents required a postal ceremony. The address was familiar in the way mansions always feel familiar in magazines. His mother's note at the bottom said she was looking forward to meeting the woman who had stolen her son's attention. I pretended the word stolen didn't cling. I wore a dress I found on a consignment rack and spent more on tailoring than I had on the dress itself. My hair behaved for once, or maybe I just bullied it into obedience. I arrived early, because that's what polite women do. When they want to be taken seriously by people who collect serious things. The Mercer house had ceilings that reminded you to stand up straight. The kind of light fixtures you stare at the same way you stare at stars, wondering how much they cost and if they ever flicker. His mother, Cassandra, met me at the door with air kisses and a ring that could blind you if you were unprepared. She smelled like an expensive garden. She was beautiful in that perfectly calibrated way rich women often are. Like a painting that has weekly maintenance. Daniel has told us so much, she said. I wondered how much was so much. And then, midway through a tour that felt like a museum with living family members, we entered the dining room. The table looked like a runway. 17 pieces of silverware per person, I counted. It was petty, but the counting helped my hand stop shaking. His father stood at the far end like a CEO at a press conference. Or like a judge. He was broad-shouldered and sparing with his smile. He did that thing where a man shakes your hand and your entire past is measured in the firmness of your grip. He introduced himself like I wouldn't know who he was. Mr. Mercer, I said. It's good to finally meet you. He nodded, as if my politeness had shown up late. We sat. We tried small talk. We failed. He asked about my family, and I told him the short version, because strangers don't get the long version. I grew up in and out of foster care. I aged out. I got scholarships. I stacked jobs. I wore my independence like armor. He listened the way you listen to a podcast you didn't choose. Then he set down his fork. I appreciate your candor, he said. But let me be frank. My son has a life that requires certain standards. We operate in circles where pedigree matters. What you call resilience, board members call risk. Daniel stiffened. Cassandra's smile thinned into something you could cut paper with. I felt the old foster home silence wrap around me. The one where you learn to breathe quietly so no one asks if you're okay, because you're not. And there's no money for therapy. I'm not a risk, I said. I'm the return on investment. He snorted. A real unmistakable snort. My son likes to rescue things, he said. He has a soft heart. We love that about him. But soft hearts don't build empires. They bleed on balance sheets. Daniel finally spoke. Dad, that's enough. It isn't, Mr. Mercer said, and looked at me with the kind of gaze that pushes people back to the neighborhoods they came from. You seem plucky. That's charming. But our name has grammar. There are people who belong next to it and people who do not. He took a sip of wine as if punctuation tasted like Cabernet. We have worked very hard to keep street garbage from sticking to us. Silence has a shape. At that table, it was a cliff. I felt my stomach tumble. Daniel went white, then red. Cassandra stared at her plate like wealth could make you invisible. I heard my own breathing go loud. I also heard a girl I used to be whisper, "Don't cry where anyone can see it." I didn't. I'm not garbage, I said softly but without apology, and the street taught me things your board can't. He smiled then, or something that rhymed with a smile. Yes, he said. It taught you to survive. Good skill. Use it to survive without my son. I stood because sitting felt like agreeing. Daniel reached for my hand and missed. I don't remember how dessert smelled or whether anyone ate it. I remember walking to the door like I was carrying a glass ceiling on my back. At the threshold, Cassandra pressed a wrapped box into my hands. For you, she murmured. No hard feelings. I opened it later to find a silk scarf and a note. A little elegance. As if my neck could absorb a new class. Outside, the night air felt human. Daniel followed me to the driveway. I'm so sorry, he said, over and over, sorry like it had a volume knob. He said he'd fix it. He said his father would apologize. He said words that tried to convince both of us he had the power to make anything different. I told him I needed time. He offered to stay with me. I said no. He said he loved me. I wanted to believe that love was bigger than royalty and old money and souls that had been dry cleaned. I drove home on streets that knew my name. Time is never neutral after someone calls you trash. It starts counting in a new currency. For a week, I cried like it could pay my bills. Then I got angry in a way that felt clean. Not feral. Not reckless. Focused. Anger can burn the house down or it can turn the lights on. I wanted a switch, not ashes. Revenge is a word people misunderstand. They think it's about pain. It's not. It's about proportion. It's about reminding the universe that dignity has a ledger. I didn't do the easy thing. I didn't torch Daniel's car or send anonymous tips to tabloids about his high school pranks. I didn't key a single fender. I didn't post a dramatic thread. I did what the street taught me. I watched. I took notes. I waited. I started with what Mr. Mercer valued most, his name. The Mercer Foundation was their favorite mirror. Photos with oversized checks, speeches about opportunity, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, a mentorship program for under-resourced youth. I had applied for that scholarship once. I'd made it to the final round and then received an email that congratulated me on my grit before telling me there were more appropriate candidates. It had taken me years to read that email without tasting metal. The foundation had a gala every spring. It was the city's annual hypocrisy parade. And I say that with respect for the charities that actually do good with filthy money. The gala theme this year was Building the Future, which was on brand for a construction family. Tickets were more than my rent. But tickets aren't the only way to enter a ballroom. On my first shift, the project manager yelled a lot. Yelling and construction are old lovers. He asked if I knew how to label crates. I told him I could label a universe. He told me to stick to stairs. I learned the location of every back hallway, service elevator, maintenance closet, and unguarded door in that building. I learned the schedule for florist deliveries and sound checks and the tuxedoed security team who moved like synchronized swimmers. On the second night, during a late-hour load, I overheard a logistics lead complaining that the projection mapping company had backed out. They needed someone to wrangle slides and cues for the donor's video reel. I volunteered before my brain cleared the word donors. He hesitated until I mentioned I'd run AV for a dozen panels during an education conference the year before. It was true. Poverty is improvisation. It collects skill sets almost accidentally. He took my number, and the next morning someone from the gala committee texted a link to a shared drive and a schedule. Can you be at rehearsal at 4 p.m.? They asked. I responded with a thumbs up and a smiley face that meant war. The rehearsal was glittering chaos. Volunteers threaded name tags. A PR team decided which adjectives were allowed on stage. A junior planner asked me to sync the donor reel with a list of honorees and cue the walk-up music. I created folders and subfolders and backups because chaos makes me methodical. By 8 p.m., I had access to every speech, every guest list, the seating chart, the honorees' bios, and, most useful, an internal schedule that noted who would be where, when and with whom. People plan their reputations down to the minute. Around 9 p.m., I found the script for the keynote. It was Cassandra's. She would speak about the Foundation's mission and introduce a new mentorship initiative. The slide deck included quotes from scholarship recipients, pull quotes about hope and grit, with faces next to them. I stopped at one. I recognized her. Not personally, but her story. First to graduate, multiple jobs, community volunteer. The foundation had tagged her on social media months ago. When they announced the cohort, I clicked the link in the notes. The link led to a private folder. Inside were application essays from several scholarship recipients. It shouldn't have been there. It definitely shouldn't have been shared so widely. But carelessness is the cousin of entitlement, and both were frequent guests in rooms like this. I opened one essay and then another. Familiar rhythms, familiar phrases. A sentence jumped at me. The street taught me resourcefulness. Another, poverty sharpened my kindness. The more I read, the more I recognized me. I dug up my old Mercer Scholarship essay from an email archive. I kept like a reliquary. I compared sentences. Entire paragraphs had been paraphrased into the voices of these new recipients. The most charitable explanation was that some internal staffer had created a template using language lifted from past essays, mine among them, and then helped applicants polish. The darker explanation was worse, that the foundation curated narratives, the way brands curate images. That truth was a fabric they cut to pattern. Was it illegal? Maybe not. Was it wrong? Yes. Was it useful? Extremely. But I needed something stronger than hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is dessert at these dinners. What I needed was a story about safety. Construction safety. The Mercer's nickname inside? The industry might as well have been schedule over safety. I knew because I'd heard it whispered by a foreman who came in for coffee, hands trembling after a site incident that wasn't his to mention. People carry the weight of what they haven't said. I rewound. If you want to break a fortress, you study its maintenance logs. I went back to my nocturnal work on the temporary staircase crew and asked questions with the curiosity of someone who loves hardware. What happens if a load is over spec? Who signs off on the welds? Do inspectors actually show up? Most people will tell you how a system fails if you ask like you intend to fix it. One of the lighting techs, a guy named Omar with patient eyes and an injured wrist, mentioned that his cousin had worked on a Mercer site last year, the East River, footbridge retrofit. They fast-tracked it, he said. Everybody knew. Overtime like candy. Then a decking panel gave. He looked away. The guy who fell? They said he wasn't clipped. But the harnesses were sticky as hell because they'd been reused past their life. People filed complaints. Stuff disappears. Disappears where? I asked gently. He shrugged. Into safer versions of the truth. I'm not a journalist. I'm a math tutor with a good memory and a borderline obsessive respect for receipts. But I had a friend who had become a very good journalist, the kind who still recorded interviews on a separate device in case the cloud betrayed her. We met in freshman year inside a dorm room with flickering lights and communal trauma. Her name was Lena, and she had the particular gift of making powerful people sweat without raising her voice. I called her. I said I had a thread. I said Mercer and safety logs and scholarship essay templates. And then I was called street garbage. And I want to do this right. She went quiet. Then she said, email me everything. Do not text. Do not DM. We will meet in person. Lena loved me enough to be paranoid. We met at a library 2 neighborhoods away. She brought a legal pad like we were in a TV show. I brought printouts. We mapped connections, the East River Bridge, a school renovation where 2 subcontractors filed, OSHA complaints that were resolved internally, a charity mentorship program that placed promising youth in unpaid internships at Mercer subsidiaries, where they learned resilience in the form of 12-hour days and no benefits. The essays, the gala, the donors, the keynote. Lena set ground rules that sounded like priestly vows. "We will verify," she said. "We will protect workers who talk to us. We will not publish until the story is bulletproof. And if this is a personal vendetta for you, you will keep it out of the copy and inside your spine." I laughed and it cracked a little. "It's both," I said. "It's personal and it's public. He thinks people like me are garbage. I want to show him what happens when garbage organizes." We divided tasks. Lena would handle worker interviews and regulatory requests. I would continue my infiltration as the world's most overqualified AV tech. The gala was in 4 days. On rehearsal day 3, I wore a headset and a smile. I learned the rhythm of Cassandra's keynote like it was a song. I adjusted the timing on the applause slide. I added a subtle transition to the mentorship section so the room would feel buoyant while swallowing PR. I was helpful. Helpful people become invisible in important rooms. It is the safest way to be everywhere. The evening before the gala, Lena texted a single sentence. "We have the inspection memos." Attached were copies of internal notes from 2 Mercer sites, documenting equipment that failed checks and then kept being used. Sign-offs that appeared to have been backdated. A staffer had leaked them to a labor rights nonprofit that owed Lena 3 favors. Names were redacted. Patterns were not. It wasn't enough to publish yet, but it was enough to plan a demonstration. The kind you can't call a stunt because stunts are for fun. We needed someone to witness what would happen in a room that believed itself invulnerable. I found our witness in a list I shouldn't have had, the dignitary table. It included the deputy mayor for infrastructure and a state senator who adored podiums. There was one more name that mattered, the new chair of the City Ethics Commission, a woman who used to prosecute corporate fraud and had a face like a metronome, steady, sure. If I could get something to land in her lap that night, the story wouldn't go quiet out of fear. Fear hates sunlight. So does rot. The morning of the gala, I woke before the alarm. I drank water like it was strategy. I ran through my plan with the devotion of someone, reciting a prayer and a heist at the same time. Step 1, be indispensable. By noon, I had fixed a corrupted video file for the opening montage, re-exported Cassandra's slides at the correct aspect ratio, and found the PR team's missing USB drive, which I had moved. Yes, but details. By 2 p.m. people were asking me questions by name. By 3 p.m. I'd earned the kind of access badge that opens doors. Without anyone looking up. Step 2, plant the truth. During a lull, I slipped into a quiet room behind the stage where extra programs were stacked. I replaced a dozen with versions that looked identical from the outside but contained inserts on page 3, a 1-page summary of the safety memos, a QR code pointing to a private repository of documents Lena had secured, and a short paragraph that began, "When we say we are building the future, we should mean a future where workers come home." I slid those special programs into the stacks reserved for the dignitary table, the press table, and a few random seats near the stage. Step 3, the audio. People assume microphones belong to the person holding them. They belong to the person who controls the board. During rehearsals, I'd noticed that the backstage channel, the headset's producers, used to talk to each other, ran through the same rack as the lectern mic. With 2 button presses and a route change, you could make backstage chatter live on the room speakers. I didn't intend to broadcast gossip. I intended to capture one sentence from Mr. Mercer that I knew would come. Because men like him prefer to say the quiet part somewhere they think is quiet. Step 4, create a moment he can't resist filling with himself. Narcissists have tells. For Mr. Mercer, it was donors he wanted to impress and an opportunity to claim credit for benevolence. He hadn't performed. The program included a surprise pledge segment, big checks, gratitude, a live tally. I suspected he'd grab the mic. I suspected he'd say something about the foundation's integrity. I suspected he'd give me the rope. By 6 p.m., the ballroom glittered like a lie that paid for its own lighting. Guests arrived like promises. Cassandra floated from table to table, gracious and glossy. Daniel entered with his father, both in black tuxedos with different languages. He scanned the room and saw me at the tech table. His eyes widened. He started toward me and then stopped when his father turned. I looked away. The program began. The opening montage did what it was paid to do. Made people believe their money had been heroic. Cassandra took the stage to polite thunder. She was good. Better than I wanted her to be. She told the story of a city and a family who loved it. She introduced scholarship recipients with adjectives that bloomed like confetti. The room clapped on cue. When she reached the mentorship slide, I took a breath and stood up inside my body. I imagined the street. I imagined the word garbage, like a match I could hold without burning. And now, she said, smiling toward the donors' tables, a moment of gratitude to those who make this all possible. Our founder and chairman, Thomas Mercer. The room did the math of wealth and rose to its feet. He walked on stage like a man accepting inevitable applause. He hugged his wife in a way that photographed well. He gripped the lectern, found the camera's red light, and began. It's fashionable these days to question success, he said, and paused for the chuckles of those who believe themselves unfashionable. But what we do here, this is beyond success. This is legacy. We build safely, we build fairly, and we build for those who need our help the most. And unlike some, he added, smiling toward the press table, we don't just talk about integrity. We demonstrate it. There it was, the rope. I routed the backstage channel live, not to the room. Not yet, but to a recorder on my laptop. Then I did something small and unforgivable. I tilted the lectern mic up 2 inches during a standing ovation moment, so his voice would carry clearly no matter where he turned his head. The audio board purred. He announced a surprise matching pledge. Wealth loves the word match. Whenever a donor stood to announce 10,000, he matched it with 10 more, each number a brick of public virtue. The live tally climbed. People cried. People always cry when math feels like salvation. And then, because the universe occasionally responds to choreography, a commotion at the press table. A young reporter, one Lena had tipped to watch page 3, had found the insert. She whispered to the person next to her. The whisper hopped tables. Curiosity is contagious even in rooms that prefer controlled narratives. I watched the ethics chair in my peripheral vision. She turned her program. She paused. She took out her phone. She scanned a QR code that did not exist in the official run of show. On stage, Mr. Mercer basked. You won't find a safer builder, he declared. Our people are our pride. In the backstage channel, the floor manager muttered, Tell that to the East River crew, not knowing I had routed the feed to record. Another voice, likely a donor liaison, replied, Shh, not tonight. I didn't smile. But in my head, the street did. Cassandra moved to close the segment. But the ethics chair raised her hand slightly. Not a shout. Not a scene. Just a gesture that stopped 2 producers cold. She stood and approached the side of the stage, with the certainty of someone who never planned to be ignored. Security's eyes did math. The floor manager spoke into my headset in a tone that meant divert. I didn't. The chair waited at the wing. When Cassandra shifted toward the teleprompter, the chair leaned in and said something I couldn't hear. Cassandra's face went through 3 expressions and landed on diplomacy. She turned to the mic. Chairwoman Hale is with us tonight, she said, her voice smooth. And she has asked for a brief word in the spirit of our shared commitment to transparency. A ballroom can inhale. Hale took the lectern. She did not smile. I applaud philanthropy, she began. But integrity is not a gala theme. It is a daily practice. This evening, I was handed documentation, suggesting discrepancies in safety compliance on recent Mercer projects and troubling practices within the Foundation's scholarship process. I will be reviewing these materials fully. I will also be speaking with workers and applicants. If what I've seen is accurate, we will act. The room changed temperature. Mr. Mercer stepped forward, casual aggression disguised as charm. We welcome oversight, he said too quickly. In fact, our commitment to safety is... And then, because men like him cannot resist proving who they are when pressed, he leaned toward the chair and, forgetting the mic was positioned wrong for his usual half-murmur, added, Let's not turn a charity night into a witch hunt. Tell your office to set up a meeting with my people. We can make certain concerns settle. The word clicked against the metal of the mic. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was clear. Settle. I could have routed that sentence to the room speakers and scorched the earth. I did not. I let it land on the recorder, on my laptop, on the memory of a dozen ears near, the front who heard it because silence had gone brittle. Lena would have the file in an hour. The chair looked at him with a calm that could end careers. We don't settle the truth, she said. We find it. The program limped on. Donors checked their phones. PR people bled into hallways. Cassandra read the rest of her script as if words could revive pulse. Daniel stood at the edge of the stage, eyes on me, expression unsolvable. I kept working. I kept breathing. I kept from shaking like I'd been trained by years that had demanded quiet endurance. After the final applause, the thin, obligatory kind, the room dissolved into expensive concern. I shut down the board and wrapped cables because tasks can protect you from feeling. When I finally looked up, Daniel was there. You did this, he said. Not accusation, certainty. I did my part, I said. The rest is a system finally hearing itself. He glanced at the side of the stage, where his father spoke in tight circles with men who live at law firms. He'll crush it, Daniel said hoarsely. He always does. Maybe, I said. But this isn't just rumors anymore. There are documents. There's an ethics chair with a backbone. There are workers who deserve not to fall through holes that should have been fixed. He looked at me, and I saw the boy who liked tacos and asked permission to hold my hand. I didn't defend you, he said. I should have. Not just that night. Every moment after. You can start now, I said. Not with me. With them? I nodded toward the crew taking apart the stage. The servers gathering plates? The people whose nights end later and heavier than everyone else's. He swallowed. And us? I don't know, I said. I loved you. That was real. But I also learned something real about you. When your father called me trash, and you went quiet long enough for the echo to settle, I picked up a coil of cable. Sometimes love is what you do when it's expensive. He nodded. It was a small, broken nod. I'll call you, he said, and then grimaced at his own cliché. That's not a promise. It's a sentence I don't know how to finish. I left him with it. Lena published 2 weeks later. By then, the Ethics Commission had already announced a preliminary inquiry. The story was long and merciless in the way. Truth should be when people build empires on bones. It included interviews with workers who had been told to reuse equipment past safety life, documents showing sign-offs that did not match site logs, and a section about the scholarship process that made me cry in a bathroom stall. Not because my essay had been cannibalized, because kids like me had been repackaged into narratives that photographed well. They deserved better. The Mercers did what rich people do when the light comes on. They issued statements. They promised an independent review. They placed a senior VP on administrative leave. Mr. Mercer went on a business trip that looked a lot like hiding. Cassandra resigned from the foundation to focus on family. Donors paused commitments. The city paused permits pending review. Everything paused except the internet and the truth. A month later, the board of Mercer Holdings announced that Thomas Mercer would be stepping down to avoid distractions. Someone else, less famous, more fixable, stepped up. The markets shrugged. The workers on the East River site got new harnesses and back pay for their overtime. The scholarship process was overhauled. Outside auditors were hired. Real counselors, not PR interns, worked with applicants. First generation stopped being a prop and started being a category with teeth. People asked if I felt satisfied. I thought about satisfaction like I thought about dessert at that dinner table. Beautiful but not necessary. What I felt was proportion. Not punishment, balance. Daniel texted me once, long after the story broke. He said he had testified to the commission about conversations he'd overheard, contracts sped up, inspections smoothed. He said his family had stopped speaking to him. He said he was moving out of the apartment with the skyline view and into a place with thin walls and neighbors who played their music too loud. He said, "I hear things differently now. I stared at the message for a long time and replied, "Good." I did not add "I'm proud" or "I'm sorry." Both were true. Neither was mine to give. On a quiet Sunday, I opened a package that arrived with no return address. Inside was the silk scarf Cassandra had given me that first night. A note in her handwriting. I should have stopped him. I should have spoken. I'm learning the cost. I folded the scarf carefully and put it in the back of my closet. Not as a souvenir, but as a reminder that complicity often looks like elegance. In the months that followed, I kept tutoring. I got a promotion at the coffee shop that came with a title and slightly less chaos. Lena won an award she pretended to hate. Omar's wrist healed. He taught his cousin how to advocate for himself without getting fired, which is a kind of magic. The ethics chair held 3 press conferences that were boring on purpose because she believed accountability should be less about spectacle and more about systems. And me? I took on a new project. Not a foundation. Not a gala. A small, noisy program at the community center 2 blocks from the coffee shop. A worker safety clinic on Thursday nights, where union reps and pro bono lawyers and tired people could trade confusion for information. I built spreadsheets and flyers and a sign-in sheet that became a ledger of courage. We started with 6 attendees. Within a month, we had 20. Within 3 months, 100. People shared stories and strategies. They passed around numbers that mattered. They learned that they weren't garbage, they were infrastructure. The city rode on their backs and called it Skyline. Sometimes late, after everyone had gone home and the cheapy, fluorescent lights hummed like old secrets, I'd sit alone with the sign-in sheet and think about the word he used on me, street garbage. I'd think about how the street had made me, about how garbage, when sorted and processed and respected, becomes something else. Recycled glass becomes light again. Reclaimed wood becomes shelter. Recovered dignity becomes a blueprint. One evening near closing, a young woman hovered by the door. She had a pen behind her ear and fear pressed into her shoulders. "Do I need a referral?" she asked, voice small. "You need a name," I said. "Yours." She wrote it. Her hand shook. I handed her a cup of coffee on the house and our pamphlet that translated legalese into something a tired brain could hold. She smiled like someone opening a window. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," I said. "Thank the version of you that walked in." On my way out that night, I pulled the scarf from my bag and wrapped it around my throat. A piece of silk that had once been a lesson and was now just fabric. The air outside was cold and honest. My reflection in the dark. Storefronts looked like a woman who could choose how to define herself. I walked past a billboard advertising a luxury tower with a name like a password, and I didn't flinch. The city glittered, not because of men like Thomas Mercer, but because of people who welded and cleaned and coded and taught and brewed and wrote and turned. Stage lights on and off at the exact moment. Someone needed to see the stage. That's the truth the street taught me. The world is built by hands that are rarely invited to the banquets that celebrate it. And sometimes, when those hands push back, the table finally moves. If you're waiting for me to say that Mr. Mercer apologized, I won't. He didn't. Maybe he never will. Maybe he will, in a way that involves lawyers and commas. That's not the point. The point is that the next time I walked into a room with ceilings taller than my childhood, I didn't straighten my spine for anyone else's comfort. I stood the way the street taught me to stand, unbowed, unpurchased, unafraid. People who call you garbage expect you to rot. Surprise them by growing, and if you're wondering whether I would do it all again for the satisfaction of a single word, the answer is no. I didn't do it for satisfaction. I did it for proportion, for balance, for workers who deserve harnesses that hold, for scholarships that respect the truth of the kids who write them, for a city that will always try to get away with what you let it, for a girl who learned to be quiet and discovered that quiet can become a strategy, and then a voice, and then a story that refuses to be edited for comfort. You don't have to set the world on fire to light it up. Sometimes you just have to know where the switch is, and keep your hand steady when the room blinks and gasps. That's what I learned when a powerful man called me street garbage at dinner, and I decided to take out the trash, not by burning it, but by sorting it, recycling it, and returning the value to the people who actually built the house.